All right, good evening to everyone. Welcome to our Wake County Board of Education meeting on October 20th. It is about call this meeting to order at 5:55. So again, good evening to everyone. We do have a quorum, and everyone is here and present with us this evening. So we're glad to have our second face-to-face meeting, and we've got a full contingent of board members now that Mrs. Cash is with us this evening. So glad to see everybody and glad to have everyone here that is with us and again be back in our normal space and finding some pathway, if you will, to a return to normal, if there is such. So we do have a quorum. If everyone would stand with me and recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can't tell you how good it is to be back and be able to do that in unison as opposed to us being virtual and 10 different pledges going on. Yeah. That was always so awkward for me. It just felt, hearing it just felt funny every time we did it. I don't care how many times we did it, I couldn't get used to that. Turn to our information items this evening, where it's turned to our Superintendent, Kathy Moore, for Superintendent's comments. Superintendent Moore.
Good evening. I'd like to start by congratulating Dr. Kristen Lewis, the school psychologist at Fuller Magnet Elementary and Martin Magnet Middle, who was recently named the 2020 North Carolina School Psychologist Association's Practitioner of the Year. A WCPSS employee for 8 years, Dr. Lewis works on the leadership, intervention, and core behavior and school improvement teams at both Fuller and Martin. At the district level, she serves on the autism team and the school mental health team and trains teachers, students, and parents in the community resiliency model, which helps people cope with stress and trauma. Working together with the Metropolitan Organization of Volunteers for Empowering Students, Dr. Lewis implemented Helping Early Literacy with Practice Strategies, or HELPS. The program provides an easy-to-use instructional strategies that are specifically designed to improve students' reading fluency. Of course, this is all in addition to her main role as a school psychologist, which includes supporting the mental health, social-emotional learning of all students and helping improve the cognitive, academic, and behavioral performance of individuals and groups of students in her charge. You can easily see why Dr. Lewis was named the best school psychologist in the state. My thanks to her for finding multiple ways to support students. Next, I'd like to recognize Abby Wood, a science teacher at Apex Friendship High School, who last week was named the Spotlight Teacher of the Week by the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards. Ms. Wood is one of more than 2,900 WCPSS teachers who have achieved National Board certification, the highest of any district in the nation. The certification process requires teachers to take on leadership roles, collaborate with their peers, and closely analyze how their practices affect student learning. Ms. Wood was honored as the Spotlight Teacher of the Week for leading professional development sessions on social and emotional learning, effectively supporting students and parents using Canvas, and mentoring new teachers. Her efforts demonstrate that the real beneficiaries of the nationally board certification process are our students. Thank you to Ms. Wood and to all those who have put their work into achieving national board certification. Finally, congratulations to Lori Craven of Panther Creek High School, who has been named the Outstanding High School Science Teacher Award for District 3 from the North Carolina Science Teachers Association. The award is given to teachers who exhibit leadership and excellence in science education by improving how science is taught to students. The winners are determined by science educators from across the state, and it's clear Ms. Craven has the respect of her peers as well as her students. One colleague said of her, "I would describe Lori as being very hardworking, goal-oriented, focused, and passionate. She works extremely hard to ensure success for all her students, and her students reciprocate her efforts." Ms. Craven will receive her award during a virtual ceremony on November 5th. Congratulations again on the well-deserved honor. That concludes my comments for this evening.
Thank you, Superintendent Moore. I don't have any shout-outs or congratulations or kudos to give, so I would just give a blanket shout-out to all of our 2,000 students, all of our 20,000 employees, all of our parents and community for just hanging in with us again during the pandemic and showing perseverance, the grit, the determination that we often see from our students during the spotlight on students. And I miss having our kids here in these meetings and seeing those. So if I miss that just for the every quarter or so that we do it, I can imagine how our teachers and principals and those in our buildings feel. So just again, to everyone that's under the sound of my voice and all of our stakeholders, thank you. Continue to hang in, persevere. We know that this is a less than perfect education experience and atmosphere, but we're all are hanging in and working our best to make sure that students continue to learn, teachers continue to teach, and everybody continues to work to make the Wake County Public School system the district and the system that it is. So with that, that's all that I have. I'll turn it over to Vice Chair Cash.
Thank you, Chair Sutton. I don't have any real additional remarks. I would like to extend, I'm sorry, I want to say I'm sorry to some of our principals out there. I feel like our last vote, after a survey that probably was, I asked for probably way too late, so I'm going to take any responsibility on that. But I do know that we got a survey from our principals close to the vote last time, and it changed the plan that was brought to us. But I just want to say to the principals, I do know that their job is virtually almost impossible right now to put into the plans that we have for them to get kids into school. I do think it's the best thing for kids to get back into school, but I do understand that we are asking our principals to do an awful lot. I just want to say that publicly.
Thank you, Mrs. Cash. We'll continue around this way. Dr. Martin.
Thank you. I'll just add my thanks to the many staff and students and families who are doing impossible work right now. It's challenging. And there is another transition coming up right now. Understand. Keep it up. Do your best. Learning, after all, is more than the grade. It's learning to adapt. And a lot of people have talked about the loss that's going to happen during this time, and I want to encourage us to think about the strength that can come out of this time, because there really are a lot of opportunities for greater independence of student learning, greater resiliency, and while it's difficult right now, I do believe it's going to give a stronger community, particularly if we can learn to work effectively as a community, get this virus under control, and keep learning in ways that don't always appear on standardized tests. Thank you.
Mrs. Scott.
And I just wanted to say thank you to all of our schools as well as they're preparing for reopening. I even thought this is one of those things that makes Eastern Wake so sweet. Some of the high school principals got together and sent out care packages to the elementary principals to remind them, how much they're cared for, that they've got their backs, that they're there to support them, that we're here to support each other. And the camaraderie between our schools is just outstanding. And that's what we need to do right now. We need to keep leaning on each other and supporting each other, because everybody, as they say, is fighting a battle that you can't see. This has taken a toll on everyone. And I just want to express my gratitude for the supports and the efforts from our staff and from my colleagues as well, because this has been one heck of a journey. And so we're here for our principals, and I look forward to seeing some of the safety practices this week too. Thank you.
Mrs. Kushner.
Thank you, and thank you, my colleagues already. Great comments and great way to start our meeting.
I was able to go to Broughton last week and witness their Wellness Wednesdays, where they are maintaining that school community and working hard to keep healthy during a very difficult time. So kudos to that Broughton community. It was great to see the educators there. And I also thank the Green Elementary PTA. They invited me and Senator Jay Chaudhry and NCAE President Kristen Beller to a virtual PTA meeting. And that was, and getting feedback from teachers and from parents and students. It's a leadership model magnet, so they had excellent questions from the students asking about reopening and some really hard questions. 2 teachers announced that they would be leaving. That was hard to hear and feel, but I also, so I was encouraged to get the update, Superintendent, more about our staff vacancies and but also that is something that is weighing heavy on all of us as we reopen. But also, to Chair Sutton's point, there's also so much resiliency and optimism and grit and stick-to-itiveness and concern and all that. It's a lot of heightened emotions, and it seemed to be crystallized in this PTA meeting. So I'm grateful to Green for that authentic meeting and for giving us that feedback, and to all of the community that's been giving us feedback. We are listening hard to a very diverse, broad-ranging opinion, and we need to stay in this together. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kirsten. Ms. Johnson-Hostler.
Thank you very much. I certainly echo my colleagues' sentiments for the gratitude and, quite frankly, I mean, the fortitude of all of our staff, but especially our principals and teachers as they prepare to welcome students back in. And for our secondary schools who are not returning to in-person, but who are certainly creating avenues to engage their students. I think I saw clubs collecting water and snacks for Election Day for our high school students. I saw clubs actually making care packages with high school clubs to send to their elementary schools. So it speaks to, I believe that, that they're listening no matter how difficult this is. And so I do want to publicly say, while we keep saying, we want to see the community at the high school level, I also acknowledge that they are also answering us by putting things into place that may not be in a plan for. And I want to acknowledge that that's a heavy lift that they're already doing. So I certainly appreciate the extra mile that our club advisors and our coaches are putting forth into engaging students at the high school level to ensure they have some camaraderie and ways to engage and to gather together. So I appreciate the efforts and works that they're putting into place, and certainly appreciate the schools who are also hearing my continuous cries and pleas for self-care and health care for our educators during this time, who are instituting things like Wellness Wednesdays, or I've seen hula hoop days. So I certainly see the administrators really trying to find ways to engage our educators in a time that's quite difficult for everyone, and the unknown is still in front of us. Even though we're planning and working hard, it still feels a strong level of uncertainty, and so I appreciate the efforts that people are putting into taking care of each other so that our caregivers are ready for our students when they do see each other face to face on Monday. So thanks to everyone for listening to what we're saying and trying to institute those things in the midst of trying to get back to some sense of what our new normal looks like. And thank you.
So I might have missed something, but what are Wellness Wednesdays?
Well, Broughton, it's part of their strategic plan to, they walk the track, they have yoga. I did yoga with Coach, and so I'm glad it wasn't recorded. But they're just various athletic, physical and mindfulness practices that Broughton has put into place for their school faculty and staff.
Okay, as long as it's faculty and staff.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, nice.
And Lincoln Heights isn't on Wednesdays, but they're doing the exact same thing for their teachers.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Fletcher.
I'll be brief. I just want to give a shout out to our communications department. The biggest challenge we face right now is effectively communicating with the different voices in our community, those with children at different grade levels, those in our community who do not have children in school at the moment. And our website is set up with significant information for wherever you fit in that continuum of community members. We'd like for you to be engaged in what we're doing. The accurate information is on our website. There's a return to campus guide there that has almost everything that parents would need to know. And if it's not in there, ask your school principal. They're great resources, and I'd like to point out one more. As we see news reports every day of different rates of infection, we see hotspots flaring up around the country in different places, and there's a great deal of concern about that. I want to point people to the resource that we're relying upon for accurate information in Wake County, which is the Department of Health and Human Services COVID website. You go down, you scroll down that page to the NC map, hover over Wake County, and you get the Wake County data. That's the data we're relying upon as one of the touch points as we consider the protocols and the propriety of opening our schools. And at the top of that graph that pops up will be the daily infection rate calculated by the state. So I encourage you to go there. I think you'll be surprised that it's not 7, it's not 8, it's not 15%. It's way below 4%, way below 5%, and consistently so. So please rely on that piece of information as you assess what we're doing in Wake County. And I appreciate the continued amount of information and questions we're getting from parents, even though not all of them might get personal answers. Your input to us is appreciated and valued. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Mahaffey.
Thank you, Chair Sutton. I would like to thank the members of my Board Advisory Council. We had a meeting last Monday, October 12th. It was done virtually over a Google Meet, which always brings some unique challenges, but with 30 schools in District 8, to get 60-plus people in a room, we'd be violating an executive order. So a shout out to our technology team of Marlo Gaddis and Allison Reed, who helped drive that as we went through that process. I want to especially thank Paul Coe, our Assistant Superintendent of Student Support Services, for touching on social emotional well-being, both on return to the building, once in the building, and for our students who are in a remote learning experience, as well as touching upon what that looks like for our faculty and staff. Don Hayden, our Interim Chief of Facilities, talking about cleaning protocols, social distancing, what spacing will look like, and physically what the building will look like for our students upon their return. And Marlo Gaddis, our Chief Technology Officer, giving us device updates and talking with parents about online safety and responsible use of those devices now that they have them. That's a continuing concern for many families of how do we stay safe in that online environment. I'd like to take a moment to thank our principals. October is Principal Appreciation Month. Normally we'd be gearing up for our big celebration. And I think we all know in this room the heavy lift that our principals have been doing this year especially. And although we can't gather to celebrate, please know that we greatly, greatly appreciate the work that you all have done. Thank you to our teachers and staff and our parents, our PTAs. I've seen so many PTAs coming in and helping to care for those that care for our students as our teachers come back to the building. And just to everyone in the community, please continue to practice those 3 W's. We want to keep those numbers that Mr. Fletcher was talking about down, get them to keep going down, so that we can feel and be safe in this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mahaffey. Mr. Hagerty.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton. Just to continue the Western Wake line here with districts 8 and 9 and now 7, talking about the return to schools. I think both Mr. Fletcher and Ms. Mahaffey, hit it right on the head. Going back to school for face-to-face instruction is important. And everybody, whether students or staff and our families that support them, everyone going in the schools, need to know and understand what they need to do to keep themselves and the staff and our community safe. And that's an important responsibility. And so I want everyone, just to encourage everyone to take this very seriously and very safely so that we can do what it is that we're attempting to do. And when something is not working, we need to make sure that we can report it and that there is accountability, and so we can fix it and then continue to deliver the educational services that we need. If you heard the work session today, for anyone just tuning in, you know that we did extend the virtual academy deadline by several more days. We're thankful for that, to give the parents and the families a little more time, a little more information where they can use to make their decisions about what they might want to do second semester. And then also the creation of a virtual option for pre-K, because I know that was something that had been in high demand. Now, I do have some good news that I want to share. I've told some of my colleagues a little bit about it. I've been working on this for a while. One of the challenges to reopening that we've had has been securing sufficient and really effective, reliable PPE. And again, thanks to the generosity of our county commission, we're able to qualify for supplemental funds from the CARES Act funding and be able to bring more of those resources back into our schools. But even then, there's been challenges. And, hearing back from some staff and some others about, some of the concerns that they've had, we've been trying to think of creative solutions, unconventional things, and I've been going out and talking to folks in the private sector about what we can do. And so today, I'm happy to announce that through the very generous donation of UNC Health is going to donate 42,000 K95 masks to the Wake County Public School System. So the K95 masks, these are non-medical grade masks. We're not taking away resources that the hospital needs for their essential operations. But when everything first started, the community reached out to support our hospitals, provided a lot of equipment to them, a lot of these masks and things. Of course, the hospitals, you want to be prepared for emergencies, but they really need the medical grade equipment. So now UNC Health is able to reach back out to the community, to school systems like ours, and provide these additional masks to us. So, all they ask in return is that we continue to promote safety in our schools, promote the 3 Ws, right? Promote, all of the steps that are necessary to keep everyone in our community healthy. And in return, we'll be able to work out the details this week to get them to the school system and get them distributed. So again, I just want to express my gratitude to UNC Health for this, and thank everyone in the community for helping to make it happen. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that work, Mr. Haggerty. Thank you to the UNC system. I'm certain that we can find a way to get those in, working with Superintendent Moore, and obviously the 3 Ws, we're definitely going to do that. So
That's right.
I think we are ready and prepared and in position to receive those. So with that, thank you for board member comments and superintendent comments this evening. Much appreciated. Moving along in our agenda, we are at the point where I am seeking approval of our meeting agenda for tonight.
Chair Sutton, I move approval of our meeting agenda as listed,
Second?
unless there's a...
If, Ms. Kushner, if you'd be open to it, I did have...
That's the second time in a row I've done that.
Sorry.
Right on my second, too, Mr. Haggerty, I'm just saying.
You were quick. You were
I'll
quick.
tell you what, let me do this. Since I got a motion and a second, let me carry that, and if we can just vote it down. If that's, I'm sorry. I think it's been properly moved and seconded, and so I think I would need to carry it, in my opinion, just to make it clean, rather than...
I mean, unless there's a proposed amendment to it, as you said.
Well, so typically at this point, we would have discussion of the motion, and with the discussion of the motion, we could move an amendment. And with moving an amendment, I was going to suggest moving item 6B from the consent agenda to action as my amendment.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All right, got a motion and a second on the, I guess, amendment first. Now, an amendment to move item 6B from consent to action. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor show by sign of aye.
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 Any opposed, nay.
Just for clarification, is it 8.6B?
I'm sorry, now I have to
Yes.
go back. Yes.
Thank you.
It's translation of those Roman numerals.
I know.
That throws me.
Okay. So this is item, which one, 6B? 86B, which is the amendment to superintendent's contract. So we'll call it out rather than the number. So it's item A6B, amendment to amend the superintendent's contract, is being moved from consent to action. Got a motion and a second for that. All those in favor again, show by sign of aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Now, that was on the amendment. So now back to the original motion, which was to approve tonight's agenda. I had a motion and a second for that.
As amended, right.
As amended. All those in favor, show by sign of aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Tonight's agenda is approved with the amendment. All right, moving to public comment. Again, residents wishing to address the Wake County Board of Education may submit their comments or video by noon the day of the meeting link, which can be found at Wake County, www.wcpss.net. As we have found ourselves back into a face-to-face meeting, but still limited access to our building in this room. We are continuing in the vein of having a limited number of public comment speakers here in person, and then still taking comments online as well. The following citizens have submitted comments as part of our public comment portion of this evening's agenda. Their comments are linked on the same online agenda we are using for tonight's meeting. That agenda, as well as guidelines for those wishing to submit comments for future virtual meetings, can be found at the school district's website, again, wcpss.net, under the tab labeled School Board. We have written comments from 39 members of the public. The topics and speakers whose comments are attached to this agenda are as follows. There are 11 speakers on school opening procedures. There are 7 speakers on SROs. There are 4 speakers on the superintendent's contract, 3 speakers on the law firm contract renewal, 3 speakers on confidentiality concerns, 3 speakers on racial equity, and several other speakers on virtual academy summer school, overloaded assignments and high school assistant principal duties, board meeting minutes and public comment, PTA requesting money, layered website org chart budget proposal, principal's accountability, school hours, dropout rate since pandemic, school reporting, principal accountability, and employee firing procedure. So those are the 39 members of the public, or the topics that are addressed from the 39 members of the public that are online. We have with us 5 speakers tonight here, and so we will go through our normal procedure. I think some of you all have been here before. The podium is here to our right, my right, some board members left, in front of you all. So again, as we have typically done in the past, the speakers there, the microphone, the lights are there, and ask that you follow the prompts as indicated. So our first speaker is Peter Bly.
So before I start, I just want to congratulate Mrs. Cash on the new addition to your family. I hope even during COVID you got to have a really good time with everybody. So listening to the work session beforehand, it reminded me yet again just how difficult of a job all of you have. You have so many people who come to you talking to you about things that are so very important and are happening in the community, but yet only affect a very small percentage of the population of the students who are in there. or in the school system, and it's got to be very difficult trying to figure out how to give those just as much priority as the larger topics. This also caused me to start thinking about the fact that my wife and I have spent the last 567 days coming to board meetings, emailing you, talking to you on the phone about a topic that actually affects a very large percentage of the student base in Wake County. And I wonder why we haven't gotten any closer to a resolution. There are kids in Wake County, or multiple demographics of kids in Wake County who are having issues with this program. You have kids who don't learn the same way as everybody else. You have kids who don't have access to technology at the home. You have kids who English is their second language. You have special needs kids. The special needs kids is the one that I wanted to talk about a little bit more today. So to recount, and since this is Disabilities Month, recount a story I've already told you once about a real-life example with my autistic daughter, where she came home from a math class, from school, having a math class one day, and she asked us, "Can you buy me a new water bottle?" And she wanted a fancy new water bottle like Mom and Dad's that was metal. And we said, "Why?" And she proceeded to talk to us about the fact that in school, her teacher had told her she had to work in a group to come up with 5 ways to solve an equation without using the standard algorithm. And so when she started to try and work with her group mates, she was having a problem because they were sticking pen caps on their fingers and pretending to be Thanos. So she beat on her water bottle with her pencil, but it wasn't loud enough, hence needing a new water bottle. So when that didn't work, what she did is she wrote down the standard algorithm on a sheet of paper, figured out the answer, reverse engineered all 5 questions, and was able to turn her paperwork in. Now, while you may think this is ingenious, for her, this was highly stressful because she is a rule follower, obsessive rule follower, and the teacher told her she couldn't use that algorithm. So she took that scrap paper and she shoved it in her pocket really quick, and she came home and made sure and was stressing about the teacher not being there or not hearing it. Since I only got a little bit of time, I'm going to go quicker. Flash forward to what's going on right now. We have Virtual Academy. I have yet to have any anxious anxiety because we can't follow the math program to the way it is actually designed. There is no way to do the group work yet. She hasn't had a problem so far because she is actually able to get the math teaching in visual form like she needs. By the way, my 15-year-old son, who started this 567-day process, hasn't had an issue with it either since doing virtual. So I ask you again to take a look at the program and realize it's not working for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Carrie Block.
Hello again. I'm going to do something a little different today. Pete and I have been coming to you for over a year and a half and asking for help and better resources to clarify what our children need to learn in your secondary math classes. You may also remember that we spent a year and a half working our way through the chain of command at our own school with teachers and administration prior to beginning our relationship with you. So I thought I would slow down today and put this journey in perspective. April 2nd marked 1 year of Pete and I coming to the board meetings. We have been personally asking you for help for 567 days. We have only missed 5 Wake County board meetings in 19 months. We are obviously not the parents that just want to be heard. We are the parents that need solutions. We are the parents that sincerely need tangible, organized, visual math learning resources for our kids in middle and high school. And we need for you to provide straightforward math content that is not being provided by your discovery-based math curriculums that you selected and approved, and that is what we still need. We thought this endeavor would take 1 board speech to get the ball rolling, maybe 2. We thought it might be possible that none of you had children in high school or middle school. Maybe you just never even looked at these workbooks. But 36 board meetings later, we are still watching our kids Google the definition of a parallelogram, being told to learn math in Khan Academy, iExcel, and Dreambox, and we are still watching math video after math video after math video, blindly scavenging for math knowledge on the internet. Early on in this process, my son asked if he could speak at a board meeting. He thought he could make a difference. And I actually told him that he wouldn't have to. It wouldn't take that long for you to see these problems. And after all this time, he asked again the other day, and I thought, just the thought of it scared me to death. So I thought I'd ask you today, should I bring my son in here, in this room, to ask you for help? Would you let your own child come in here? Just imagine if I was actually a child standing at this podium 28 times in a row, asking you for simple help, trying to advocate for myself instead of me, because I'm only here because a 13-year-old doesn't have the maturity or the wisdom or the vocabulary to advocate in this way. Those of you that Pete and I have grown to trust know exactly why we're here, and you know very specifically why Pete and I made that promise that we did and why we have no intentions of leaving this podium. We hope that you gain the empathy and the insight as our board members to understand that every time we leave this podium without even the hope of a solution, your inaction speaks volumes to us as parents in your district, and it unfortunately speaks volumes to our children and the students of Wake County.
Thank you, Mrs. Bly. Steve Lauderdale.
Good evening. My name is Steve Lauderdale. I'm here with my two best friends tonight, my mask and my hand sanitizer. I'm here to thank the board and the staff for your dedication and hard work. I'm part of the 70% of residents that do not have children in the school system. I am a taxpayer and voter. I am interested in public education because I believe it is one of the top responsibilities of local government. I appreciate the board and staff's thoughtful plans for dealing with COVID. I repeat, I do not agree with some critics that have stated COVID will, quote, disappear like magic after the election, unquote. I do not, repeat, not agree with some critics that state, quote, wearing a mask does nothing, unquote. So I want to thank you individually and collectively for your work that you've done in 2020. Your job has been very difficult this year, and under the circumstances, your work has been excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lauderdale. Jennifer Stanfield. Jennifer Stanfield. While we're waiting, we'll go to Ginger Gorell.
Hi, my name is Ginger. I'm a parent and with 3 children in Wake County systems. They are in 8th, 6th, and 4th grade at Carnage Middle and at Olive Chapel. I'm also a local math tutor, and I want to share a little bit about our remote learning experience and some of the concerns about return to school. My children are in school. They go to class every day. They interact with their teachers and their peers every day. Sometimes they have homework. Sometimes they do it. Sometimes they don't. But my children are receiving an excellent education right now, and I'm so impressed with that. I'm impressed with everything that's been set up and the fact that it has been relatively seamless given all of the circumstances. My kids are attending clubs. My child is attending a speech and debate club. I don't know if that's good for me. It's good for her. So, and I tutor mostly upper-level math classes, upper-level math students, and I've been impressed with how quickly the teachers have been pivoting and putting all of those materials online. As a side note, most of my students attend Apex Friendship High School, and that is the strongest math department I have ever seen in my 20-plus years of tutoring. So shout out to them. I have been very grateful to see that attention has been paid to science, to statistics, to the CDC, the health department, and I believe the Science Advisory Council, which I probably got those letters mixed up because these notes actually are partly some of my tutoring. So I personally had COVID-19, and when you hear all these numbers about people who recovered versus didn't, I'm not in those numbers because I'm not better. I've had it 6 months. I was perfectly healthy before, and now I see a cardiologist and a pulmonologist. I have low blood pressure. I'm freezing right now despite wearing several wool layers. It's no joke. So I'm happy to see that the board is taking this as seriously as they can. I know that we have a plan to return to school and to school building, and my only concern is I see that these are the things that are mandated. We've got to do these things. I see that a student who refuses to comply will be suspended or removed. I hope that the teachers and the staff are receiving the actual steps to make that happen. I want to know that they are not putting themselves in more harm's way trying to enforce something from a child who's willfully not doing what they're supposed to do. Because we've all been out in the community. We've all driven by the parks. Nobody's wearing masks. Nobody's washing their hands. It's very discouraging to see. And the final thing I want to say is that when we're looking at moving the high schools back to in-person, consider speaking directly to classes that have a small PLT. I know that all of these can connect with other schools, but some of them are a little bit unique, so consider talking to them directly, please.
Thank you, Ms. Guerrero. And again, one last call for Jennifer Stanfield. Okay. That concludes our public speakers.
Chair
Again.
Sutton, there was a change. There's one more name.
I have a Fallon Seabrook, but I have not speaking, so I'm not.
That's changed on the digital document.
Okay. All right, Fallon Seabrook. I apologize for that, Ms. Seabrook.
It's okay. I would like to know what support can be given toward the virtual academy students in case a teacher or a student in Plan B contracts this virus. I was specifically asking for my daughter because she's in virtual academy all year, but she has friends in Plan B that may get this virus and pass away. So what can be given to them? That's all.
Mrs. Seabrook, normally we have staff here that will be able to respond to your question, but because most of our staff is virtual, we don't at this time. But if we can get your information or what have you and have somebody to get back to you with the appropriate support. So Dr. Gardner's going to come around and speak with you. He's going to come around the back way and speak with you. Yeah. All right, so that concludes our public comment. All right, we have one information item, and that is reopening updates from our superintendent. So Superintendent Moore, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Sutton. We're using the superintendent's updates in the board meeting tonight to just reiterate for the public who might attend the board meeting that don't attend the work session some of the high points of the work session presentation from earlier this afternoon. And just the highlights then from there. So first, just want to remind folks of the plans that are in place already for the remainder of first semester. Our pre-K to third grade and our K-12 regional programs begin a 3-week rotation, 1 week on, 2 weeks off, next Monday, October 26th. After that 3-week rotation, they will return to fully in-person daily instruction, pre-K 3, and K-12 regional programs. That would be November 16th. Then our 4th and 5th grade students will begin a 3-week rotation on November 16th and remain in a 3-week rotation through the remainder of first semester. Our grades 6-8 students will begin a 3-week rotation on November 9th and begin a 3-week rotation through the remainder of first semester as well. And then our 9-12 students will remain in remote learning for the remainder of first semester. The next part of our presentation that I would like to highlight for those that are listening is there's a lot of information that is available to families and examples of what a return to campus will look like. We encourage families to visit the www.wcpss.net website and go to the Return to School page, where there is a Return to Campus guide that contains a lot of information and pictures and things and there are videos on that site as well that we've been pushing out so that families can actually see what the return to in-person looks like, see the kinds of measures that are being taken at schools, and then be able to then experience them and provide us feedback on what they see happening in our schools. There's a lot of work that's been done at the school level to prepare for students to return. Our schools do have a reopening of school checklist that has a lot of information on it that forms the basis for how each school creates their plan for the details, like carpool duty, screening procedures, what lunch is going to look like in a building, what a socially distanced classroom looks like, when they're going to go wash their hands or experience recess or any of those other things. So we do ask our parents to look at the Return to Campus guide, and as Mr. Fletcher actually said earlier, if they have questions that are not covered by what's in the Return to Campus guide, to please touch base with their principals. And then for our staff, we have asked our principals this week to do a couple of things just to make sure that they are closing the loop with preparing for those that are having students return next week. We want all of our principals explicitly to make sure that they have covered the Return to Campus guide with all of their staff members. I believe this work has been ongoing and iterative through this entire few months that we've been closed as staff have been coming in. But this being the first full week that all of our staffs are expected in the buildings, we think it's important that they make sure that they explicitly are covering the Return to School checklist with their staff. Second, as a part of that Return to School checklist, we have asked our schools to practice protocols for arrival and those kinds of things so that they can practice the screening procedures. The board members asked earlier about possibly being invited to some of those and being able to see them in person, so we were going to get you that information. But we have asked principals to try to get those screening practices of those protocols done by tomorrow, knowing that, of course, in our traditional calendar schools, Friday is a teacher work day, and because that's a day where the staff will be on campus and not engaged in remote instruction, that might provide another or an opportunity to do some of those practices as well. We also talked in the last meeting about specifically how we're going to refine and ramp up some of the monitoring and accountability processes that have been questions and concerns through this whole plan for reopening. And so a couple of changes in particular that we want to make sure that we highlight. First, since last Friday, I've asked our communications department to work with Kristen Beller at NCAE, who has an idea for a self-screening type of process that teachers could complete on a regular basis, daily even, to just ensure that the things that we are saying that we are providing to them, they actually have access to. So they can let us know that they have PPE, that they have the supplies that they need in their classroom for cleaning, that they are self-reporting on how they are wearing masks and others around them are wearing masks and socially distancing. I believe that school level data will be very helpful, first for the principal to review to see where there are spots or places where there may need to be some changes or addressing or monitoring, as the principal will have to do. And that will be real-time data that the principal will have. And I think there's also an opportunity for that data to be reviewed by area superintendents on a regular basis to see if there are consistent issues where we can provide support or direction to schools around how to address the things that are coming up. We are also hopeful that in that same opportunity that we can provide an opportunity for teachers to call out things that are going well in their schools also. A second piece of that, how we're going to communicate and revise our accountability, is we are asking the superintendent's leadership team, the area superintendents, and other members of the superintendent's leadership team, including the chiefs, to regularly visit schools with an average of 30 to 40 per week that we can go to and really monitor some of the things that we are asking be put in place so that, again, we can provide both support and oversight to schools to ensure that the things that we are asking be in place are actually in place. And then the third piece that has been talked about quite a bit, we are going to stand up, and we will have it ready by next Monday. We've been working on a number of things. An opportunity and a way for any staff who have a concern about expressing something that they see that's not going well at a school to be able to do so anonymously. We are going to need to ask what school the person is reporting from or department so that there can be follow-up. And we're going to pilot this to see what kind of feedback we get. Does it expose a gap in what's happening with the self-reporting? Does it expose a gap in what we're monitoring when we go to the schools? And how do we make sure that all of this information that we're using is timely, that it provides an opportunity to make changes as needed and engage folks in making sure that we are prioritizing health and safety and a good experience for our staff and our students in the building. So those are some of the highlights of returning into the building. The next portion that we covered today were planning assumptions for second semester. So what is staff planning on for second semester? And we did explain that the planning assumptions for second semester are what our plans are that we will turn into a proposal that we will bring to the board. Our timeline was to discuss the planning assumptions tonight, get questions, bring a proposal to the board for discussion at a work session on November 10th that would then be adopted at your next board meeting, which I think is November 17th. So in those planning assumptions for second semester, pre-K to third grade and K-12 regional programs, our planning assumption is that they will remain in daily in-person instruction as they will be by the end of first semester. For fourth and fifth grade, our planning assumption is that those grades would begin second semester in daily in-person instruction, which is a shift from the 3-week rotations that they will end first semester in. Our planning assumptions for grades 6-8 and for grades 9-12 are that they will return second semester and be in a 3-week rotation. Grades 6-8 will continue the 3-week rotation that they were on at the end of first semester. Grades 9-12 would begin a 3-week rotation. And I must stress that at this time, that is the planning assumption that we must put forward a Plan B option because there is not a Plan A option for grades 6-12 at this point in time. So the social distancing requirements, the less capacity in a building, all of those things are still requirements in Plan B. Hence, the rotation is the planning assumption that we are working under. The 3 things that we mentioned that we will need to continue to monitor that might shift the planning assumptions are first and foremost, anything that may come as a governor's executive order or changing guidance at the state level that we would require that we look at what our planning assumption is. Second would be our continued work and collaboration with local health officials, Wake County Health Department, and our collaboration with the ABC Science Collaborative so that we can continue to monitor the data and the research that they are bringing us about other districts that are further along in opening, that have been open for a while, and we can see how they are doing so that it informs our decisions as well. And then the third piece that is context for how we work with our planning assumptions is we're going to need to monitor our return to in-person instruction in our buildings and continue to get feedback from principals and teachers, as well as the other mechanisms that we have for gathering feedback and addressing questions and celebrating things that are going well also. So those things are still underlie and could cause us to have to pivot or change from where we're moving. So we have to go into second semester knowing that we must maintain that flexibility. We have a plan that we will propose to the board. You heard the planning assumptions this evening, barring any of those other 3 things that I mentioned having big changes. That'll be what you see when we come back on November 10th and staff has a proposal for the board. And then the last item that we talked about this evening associated with that return for second semester were how we would set the virtual academy reminders and windows for when parents could make a choice about what they would like for second semester for their student. There will be the windows that we've communicated are that the virtual academy window for deciding what you want for second semester for secondary, which is middle and high school, will be October 21st through November 4th. That's a 2-week window. And the window for elementary schools will begin December 2nd and run through December 9th. That's a 1-week window. There was some discussion this evening about those, really the push and pull of what we're asking of families and what they might need to know, and the balance with what the planning is necessary for schools. So we will have also next Monday at Student Achievement Committee meeting, you have an update on Virtual Academy as part of the agenda. So I believe there will be some follow-up there as well for that. And that is a very high-level overview of the work session that we began at 3 o'clock. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Thank you, Superintendent Moore. We didn't have time after our work session for questions on that update. Any quick comments, questions from board members at this point? Mrs. Scott.
Thanks. I forgot to ask this before. Had there been an update on whether or not there would be a dashboard on the website?
Yeah, I did mention that briefly during the presentation. We will have a dashboard available that will track cases in our schools. We are planning to stand that up beginning next week, and it'll likely be updated weekly. And we're doing it in collaboration with our local health officials.
Great, thank you. I'm sorry that I missed that.
That's a good question.
All right. Okay. Thank you for that. All right. So if I could entertain a motion to approve the items on consent as amended.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. That was motion made by Mr. Fletcher, second by Ms. Johnson-Hostler to approve the consent agenda as amended. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, show by sign of aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Consent agenda is approved. Moving to our action items. We have a couple of items here, starting with finance. So I assume that would be Mr. Nieder.
He's coming.
Good evening, sir.
Tonight, as you said, Mr. Sutton, we've got a couple items related to the annual 2020-2021 budget. The first has to do with a policy that's in place, and the second will be an actual request to approve a balanced budget resolution. So the proposed budget includes an appropriation of $8.7 million of fund balance to balance itself. And this amount exceeds the threshold that's specified in Board Policy 8101. That policy directs that the board will not use more than 50% of its unassigned fund balance to balance a future year's budget. So because of that, we ask, prior to your adopting a balanced budget resolution, your consideration of waiving Board Policy 8101. Staff has carefully considered this, and we are comfortable in recommending to the board this amount of fund balance to invest in balancing the budget. I do want to point out that waivers similar to this of this policy and for this purpose have been approved by boards in the past. And I would now ask the board's consideration of approval of waiving Board Policy 8101.
I'm sorry, I'd like to make a motion that we waive that policy.
Second.
Got a motion from Mrs. Cash and a second by Mr. Fletcher to waive Board Policy 8101 in approval of the proposed 2020-21 budget. Is there any discussion? And just wanted to note that the purpose of waiving this policy, this particular policy requires that we spend no more than 50% of our fund balance to support the budget. And I think there in our précis it shows that that amount is at 11.4 million, and the recommended amount is 8.7, which exceeds the 50% threshold. So that's why we are passing this or approving or waiving our policy, because it exceeds that threshold. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor show by sign of aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Policy 8101 is waived in preparation of approval of the budget. Turn it back over to you, Mr. Nieder.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sutton. At your Finance Committee on September 15th, and again at your work session on October 6th, staff presented recommendations to balance the board's proposed 2020-2021 budget to the final county appropriation and also to state legislation directly related to the budget. Those recommended adjustments include adjusting other local revenues to revised forecasts, and those were downward based upon current events, aligning compensation and benefits budgets to actual state legislation related to those two items, removing specified business cases, and reducing central services contracted services budgets based upon the delayed opening of schools. I do want to make a couple comments before we move into the my requesting that you consider approving a balanced budget resolution, including these adjustments. As I've shared with you 2 weeks ago, and again, I believe also at your Finance Committee meeting back in September, even after the board adopts a final balanced budget resolution, it's likely that throughout the remainder of this year, we will continue to have budget adjustments that we bring back to the board based upon current events, both seen and unforeseen at this point. And then a couple other things I want to just put out there as reminders, and that is we will have challenges as we enter into our next budget season, which staff is actually just beginning at this point, because as we plan for the 2021-2022 budget, based upon first one of the recommended adjustments, which is that almost $14 million reduction to contracted services, which did not directly impact the district this year, but that was based upon the delayed opening. Assuming we're open for business for the entire year next year, that's I think the number was $13.8 million level of funding that we will have to identify a source for. And then second, I do want to remind the board that the increase in county appropriation for the current year, which was just under $12 million, is non-recurring. So that's another item that just out of the gate as we look to next year, we will have to address. So again, that's not for you to take action on tonight, but I do want, it behooves me to reiterate and remind the board that we do have challenges ahead of us as well. So with that said, I'd be glad to answer any questions and ask the board's consideration of approval of the recommended adjustments to the proposed budget for 2020-2021 and adopting a balanced budget resolution.
Mrs. Cash.
So I would like to make that motion to approve this budget. This has been, I think my colleagues have done a lot of work on this. Staff has done a lot of work, and I appreciate that work. And I know next year's, starting with a budget that we have spent some money that we will not have reoccurring, will be a tough year for us, but we'll just work towards that. That's my motion to approve.
I'll second.
Got a motion from Mrs. Cash, second from Mrs. Mahaffey to approve the 2020-2021 annual balanced budget resolution. Is there any discussion? Dr. Martin.
Yes, Mr. Nieder, thank you for noting all of these one-time expenses that are, or at least many of them. We also have the $3 million that I think we're charging to Medicaid or Medicare as well. So, I mean, we're between the fund balance, the savings, the Medicaid, that's $25.3 million, and then there's the additional 12. So we're starting at a major deficit. So I guess I would just, I would love to hear a little bit more from you. I mean, we have to support this budget because we need a budget, you know, and like you say, it modifies, but as the expenses go on. But what is a strategy to address this? Because this clearly is not sustainable, and our job as a fiduciary body is to make sure that we have a sustainable budget for going forward. So I'm just, what's our starting point? How are we going to begin to address this?
Sure. Good, very good question and pertinent question, Dr. Martin. Several things. First, we do have CARES funding that is a possible bridge in funding, and that CARES funding that we currently have can be used in the next fiscal year, subsequent fiscal year. I'm not proposing that's where we would go. It would not be, at least from my perspective, an initial recommendation, but it is a backstop, and it is something we did use during the Great Recession as a tool to manage funding uncertainty. Second area would be unassigned fund balance. And again, we will be presenting the CAFR to you at a point later in the year, and this will give me an opportunity to give you an update on that very briefly. But based upon our expenditure restrictions that we put in place back in the spring and hiring restrictions in central services, we do anticipate an increase in unassigned fund balance over prior years by design, just as we did by design during the Great Recession period. That will be an opportunity. It's interesting, earlier today I had a virtual meeting with the CFO at Wake County Government, Emily Lucas. We were just comparing notes about how we saw current things and future things fiscally. And we talked about these very things about how we were going to plan going forward. And at this point, and things can change, the county is pleasantly surprised that things are not, let's say, bleaker as it relates to their revenues. So those are some ideas. There may be some very difficult decisions as we get into next year's budget as well. There are multiple ways to fund something. Ask for additional funding or unfund something, and that will be another thing we will likely look at in the coming year, looking at what we can do without in order to put some of these things back in as necessary. I would just add very, very briefly, we normally bring the annual financial report to you usually at your second November or 1st December meeting. Based upon some federal audit changes, we're required to do something called a single audit for large federal programs. This year, they're implementing that for CARES funding as well. Our auditors are still waiting from the federal government for guidelines for that audit. So the audit is going to be delayed. It will likely be into the next calendar year, i.e. maybe January, before we'll be in a position to bring the final audited financial statements to you. So I just sort of slide that in as an extra information item.
Ms. Johnson-Hosler.
Did I hear you correctly that you're saying that the CARES Act funding will be able to be used past 12/30/2020? Is that what you just said?
Yes.
I think you likened it to the ARA funding.
Yes, you did hear me, but let me clarify, Ms. Johnson-Hosler. Some of the funding, not all of the funding, some of the funding, the specified purpose funding does expire at the end of the calendar year, although it's possible they may extend it. I don't know that we'll know that until after the election. But the large amount, the $24 million we did receive, that will go into the next fiscal year.
Thank you for the clarification.
Ms. Kushner.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton. And thank you for sharing the county's budget with us at our seats. And at one point in June, their shortfall that they were assuming was going to be $28.8 million. In your talks with Ms. Lucas, you suggest that they didn't think that had gotten worse, or that can you speak a bit more about what their more updated projections for the county budget might be, loss in revenue due to COVID?
Yeah, well, again, from the county's perspective, two of their primary revenue drivers are property tax, that being the predominant one, and sales tax revenues. And so property tax, barring a situation where people are defaulting left and right on properties and then not paying property taxes, the real variable becomes sales tax then, as far as being able to reasonably forecast their revenues. And while she didn't give me any numbers, the revenues were coming in higher than they projected, or they weren't dropping as much as they thought. I don't have exact numbers for you.
Their sales tax has been lowered, but I think it would be, and that doesn't affect our budget as much, but thank you. For any updates, I think, from Ms. Lucas would be helpful if we could, just to keep track of what the forecast looks for our county partners.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Fletcher.
Briefly, as we went through the review of the tough decisions that staff made and then recommended to the board to reduce our expenditures to bring them in line with the expected revenues, it was very clear that our primary funder, the legislature, is going to need to step up and not only maintain ADM funding, but fund some of the other programs that are clearly needed: social workers, school counselors, nurses, psychologists. The support for the mental health of our students and staff is critically needed, and we need to look to the legislature with a very precise plan to restore the funding that we had to cut this year, and to step up to the plate in a major way to make North Carolina the education state once again.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. All right, hearing no further comments. Again, a motion is on the table to adopt the annual balanced budget resolution. All those in favor show by a sign of aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Ayes have it. Our 2020-2021 annual balanced budget resolution is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nieder. Up next are a couple of policies for our consideration.
Good evening, Chair Sutton, Superintendent Moore, and members of the board. Tonight, we come to you to present two policies for your review and request to adopt on first reading. The first policy will be Board Policy 3800, Benefits and Employment 9.3.1, Episodes of Violence, first reading. That policy will be presented to you with this revision by Dr. A.J. Matillo, Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, who will be joining us virtually. That will be followed by the second board policy, Board Policy 9300, naming facilities on first reading, and that policy will be presented to you for your review this evening by Ms. Betty Parker, Senior Director of Real Estate Services. Dr. Matillo, I now turn it over to you to share with the board the policy revisions and ask for adoption on first reading.
Dr. Matillo, I think you're muted.
Blended learning.
Yeah, easy.
Thank you. Can members in the boardroom hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. There we go.
Okay.
We can hear you and see you now.
Great. Sorry for that.
Not a problem.
Once again, I'm here to present to you the first reading of Policy 3800, Benefits and Employment, which includes a revision of Section 9.3.1, Episodes of Violence. Policy 3800 is being presented as a revision of current policy. When given final board approval, it will replace Policy 3800, Benefits and Employment, Section 9.3.1 for episodes of violence. This policy was reviewed at the September 29th Policy Committee meeting. As a reminder, the change designates to the superintendent or designee the authority to approve an employee's claim for an episode of violence. As a result of feedback from the Policy Committee, we added a report to the board at least quarterly of all approvals within the policy. Designating the superintendent or designee the authority to approve an episode of violence will allow employees to more immediately begin receiving episode of violence benefits. We are requesting the board's approval on first reading of Policy 3800, Benefits and Employment, Section 9.3.1, Episodes of Violence this evening.
Mrs. Kushner.
Chair Sutton, thank you, and thank you, Dr. Matillo. I would make a motion that we approve for first reading Board Policy 3800, Benefits and Employment, and 3800, and those revisions, as Dr. Matillo outlined, are to expedite things for employees who do become victims of episodes of violence in our schools. Thank you.
All right, got a motion by Mrs. Kushner, second by Mr. Hegarty. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor show by a sign of aye.
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 Any opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Board Policy 3800 is approved on first reading.
Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. All right, and then I think we're going straight to the next one, Board Policy 9300.
We are. Good evening, Chair Sutton, Superintendent, board members of the board. Mr. Martin here, and as Dr. Gardner alluded to, with me this evening is Senior Director of Real Estate Services, Betty Parker. We are here to present to you on first reading Policy 9300, naming facilities, and at this point, I'll let her take it from here so she can present and answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Good evening, Chair Sutton, Superintendent Moore, and ladies and gentlemen of the board. I'm pleased to be with you for the first reading tonight of Policy 9300 regarding naming. We're presenting this as part of the policy migration process. Once approved, it will replace current Policy 2570 on naming of schools and 2571 naming of individual school buildings, structures, furnishings, books, and scholarships. The one aspect of this policy has that the previous didn't is it also provides a process for renaming schools. The policy was reviewed at the September 29th Policy Committee meeting. We received some input from the board and effected a few minor changes that have been implemented in the policy that you currently have. We would request the board's approval on this first reading of Policy 9300 on naming facilities. I'm happy to address any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mrs. Parker. Mrs. Kushner.
Thank you, Chair Sutton. And with that, I would move approval of Board Policy 9300, naming facilities, for approval on first reading.
Second.
Got a motion by Mrs. Kushner and a second by Mrs. Mahaffey to approve Board Policy 9300 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor show by sign of aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Board Policy 9300 is approved on its first reading.
Thank you.
And then our last action item is an amendment to the superintendent's contract. Second amendment to superintendent's contract revises Section 14, which is a section on unilateral termination by the board, to align with the contract amendment of the former superintendent and changes the severance pay from 12 months to 24 months. This amendment does not change the current salary of the superintendent. There are no immediate or definite fiscal implications. Just wanted to let me first entertain a motion, then we'll have discussion.
Chair Sutton, I'll make a motion to approve this.
Second.
Got a motion from Ms. Mahaffey, second by Ms. Johnson-Hostler, to make amendment to the superintendent's contract. So again, just to open up a bit of discussion and to provide some context or background around this, when we hired Superintendent Moore, being that this was her first opportunity as a superintendent, but recognizing the fact that she had several years of experience in the district, and in the past, the baseline buyout clause for superintendents might range anywhere from 12 months to 24 months. 12 months sort of being the end for less experience, 24 months recognizing superintendents with more experience. The former superintendent had experience here in North Carolina in several districts in Burlington, Alamance, and Virginia Beach, and so his contract included a 24-month buyout clause, and the board discussed at that time upon hiring Superintendent Moore that we would start at the 12-month buyout clause, but after some time we would come back to revisit that and look at extending that, recognizing the fact that this was her first superintendency. It had been our plan to come back earlier in the spring, around May, June of this year, to take this action, but because of our focus on the pandemic, and we sort of had our head down with regard to COVID, we were not able to do that, or had not actually getting around to doing that. So we are here at that point now, and wish to again extend the buyout clause of her contract from 12 to 24 months, really in recognition of the experience that she has gained since being here in this seat. Any other discussion? Mrs. Mahaffey.
Chair Sutton, can you talk about the implication should Superintendent Moore choose to retire? This does not pertain to anything. This is only if the board decides to remove the superintendent, correct?
That is correct, but I'll look to Mr. Blumberg to add any specific details.
I just want to
around
add questions for clarification because we have received a number of emails, and I want to make sure that folks understand the why and the how.
100% correct. This would solely be in the extraordinarily unlikely event that the board unilaterally decided that they just wanted to terminate the contract. Wouldn't be if the superintendent retired, decided to go to a different district, did anything else along those lines, that leaving voluntarily. This would be an involuntarily separation by the board in that one unique circumstance, very singular. That's the only time it would apply.
Thank you, Mr. Blumberg.
Well, just for quick clarification, that does not include for cause. For cause, I believe, is a different scenario.
Absolutely different scenario, that if a superintendent engaged in misconduct, which would never happen here, but if the superintendent engaged in misconduct, then, or there was a pattern of serious performance issues, then the board is by law and under the contract could terminate for cause and wouldn't have to pay any of that.
Ms. Johnson-Hostler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair Sutton, for giving such an explicit explanation at the top of this discussion. I think it's important, especially having been chair when we hired Superintendent Moore, that she certainly continued to push back on the need at this time to put this clause in her contract. And I think it's important that people know, for me, hiring the first female superintendent, the first female superintendent of color to not have this clause from the start, and she can nod her head that we had a lot of back and forth about. For me, it was about equity. If we do all of our work, including the work with our students with equity, there's no way we shouldn't have been doing that for our superintendent. However, she's a better negotiator than I, so we did walk away from that table without this clause in her contract, and I think it's important that the public know that this was, to your point, Mr. Sutton, this is something we promised to revisit in May, which would have been the anniversary of her hire, and we did not. But I do think it's important to note that this would have been in her original contract. But Superintendent Moore loves Wake County Public Schools, and we all know that. She's been here for a very long time. But what I can tell you is negotiating the contract with her, that's the sentiment I walked away from the table with. That's why I didn't continue to push her, because this was about her wanting this position, but also wanting to prove herself. And I think the public has a right to know that that's how you entered this contract with Wake County Public Schools. And certainly for me, as the former chair during that tenure, I want the public to know how that went And indeed, it was the board's intention at that time, but I think that is necessary to speak to your commitment to our school. And certainly, this has been an unprecedented year on so many ways and so many levels, but I certainly can attest to, I'm not sure when you sleep, because you absolutely, when you say every student every day, you mean that about every single person that touches Wake County Public Schools. And I think it's important the public knows that I felt it when we hired you, and I still feel it today.
Thank you for that very important context. I started to say Chair Johnson Hostler. Well, thank you for that important context. Yes, Mr. Hager.
If I could just direct a question to Mr. Blumberg, too. I know that your firm represents a lot of different school districts. You work in a lot of these different negotiations. How common is something like this, and what sort of variations have you seen before?
So there's wide variation. There's superintendents that are able to negotiate having no buyout, in that, but the board here and in other districts have wanted a buyout provision.
Now, explain that. Why would someone not want to buy out?
Because that would require then that the only way that the superintendent could be separated is for cause. So a buyout provision is a provision that boards often want so that they don't have to go through a very elaborate process for separation and can do it unilaterally on their own.
Okay.
So a number of superintendent contracts, the superintendent has insisted it not be in there, and the board accepted that. But the range on time, it's 1 year, there's 2 years, and then there's ones that go all the way up to the full extent of the contract. So and superintendent contracts can go up to 4 years. So you see that variation.
Okay.
And again, that the former superintendent's contract as amended was for 24 here in Wake.
Thank you.
I cannot remember a time in my 11 years here and the superintendents I've been through that we've had a superintendent that did not have at least a 12-month buyout clause. Seeing no further comment, again, motion on the floor to approve the amendment to the superintendent's contract to extend the buyout clause from 12 months to 24 months. All those in favor show by a sign of aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Ayes have it. The amendment is approved. This time, can I entertain a motion to go into closed session for the items on our agenda?
Chair Sutton, I would like to make a motion that we go into closed session for the purpose of to consider confidential personnel information protected under GS 143-31811A 1A3 to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided in GS 143-31811A3, and to consider confidential student information protected under GS 115C-402 and the Family Educational and Privacy Rights Act, 20 U.S.C. 1232G.
Second.
And a motion by Mrs. Cash and a second by Ms. Mahaffey to go into closed session for the items stated or that are per our agenda. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor show by a sign of aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Ayes have it. We now are in closed session. Before we move and adjourn, I just want to take one other item, just recognize our communication staff and our IT staff. This now brings to a close our second public face-to-face meeting, and I think by all accounts we have had two very smooth meetings, all of course being socially distanced, but particularly the technology and bringing in staff from various places in the building, all seeming like we are here as one, even though we are not. And when there are so many opportunities, particularly with technology, for things that can go wrong, it has gone amazingly smooth for these last 2 months. And so, knock on wood, but I certainly want to thank our staff, Superintendent Moore, thank our staff, our IT staff, and communication staff for pulling off what is clearly not a difficult, not an easy job.
And Melissa and Russ, thank you both.
Yeah. Thank you all for being here, Melissa. And we know Melissa, so being here is not.
Not a choice.
She's not going to say a word. So again, with that, we are now standing in a closed session. Thank you so much, and thanks everybody virtually for being a part and your attention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, how do we do this? I wasn't here.
We stay here.
I stay here?
We can stay here. Yeah.